Hey, I'm back! Alright, I know I've been gone for way too long at this point, but we are finally back with another video. I won't hold you up for too long, I'll get straight into the video, but real quick, I just want to put a little disclaimer here. Some of today's entries get a little bit dark, so I'm just going to tell you that there are timestamps in the description if you want to skip past any of those. I get if some of this stuff isn't really your thing, so feel free to skip past them if you need to. Because as we get deeper into the iceberg, it's going to get more and more dark. Alright, I'll stop being a nerd, let's get right to it. Okay, imagine this. You're a medieval farmer, and you're out in the fields one day just plowing the field, farming your crops, when suddenly, animals start falling from the sky like it's a fucking Old Testament story. We're talking frogs, fish, spiders. What the fuck? Even an octopus. Has God smited you? Well, it sounds like a story straight out of the Old Testament. Animal rain is a phenomena that happens surprisingly often, and although there is no confirmed explanation for the phenomena, it is widely speculated that it is caused by waterspouts launching creatures out of the water into the air, where the creatures are carried by winds to far off lands. But there's still no confirmed answer for what causes it to happen. The Baghdad Battery is a clay jar that is over 2,000 years old and sort of resembles a battery. This has led to quite a few conspiracy theories popping up around it. Some claim that because of this, the ancient Egyptians had access to electricity, but we really don't know what the battery is used for. It is theorized, however, to be used for electroplating or electrotherapy, but there's really no evidence to support this. Arrte Sella is a series of outdoor art exhibits in the Valsella Valley in Trentino, Italy. There are about 30 sculptures in the valley, and most of them are made out of local resources like sticks, stones, and logs. 52 Hertz Whale is the name given to an unknown whale whose call is 52 Hertz. It is the only one known to do this in the ocean, and for this reason it has been given the nickname as the world's loneliest whale. Alexandria's genesis is a fake genetic mutation that appeared online in the mid-2000s, the symptoms of which include purple eyes, pale skin, perfect vision, increased immune system, and no body or facial hair besides the head. I'm sure you could guess that this is not a real thing, but at a certain point in time, a lot of people on the internet thought this was in fact real, and even thought they had it. The reality of the situation is that Alexandria's genesis was made up by a Daria fanfiction author, and the people on the internet took it out of context and spread it around. So yeah, there's not much more to this one. It's just fake. Albert Stevens was a house painter from Ohio, but shortly after moving, he checked into a hospital where he was misdiagnosed with terminal cancer. Because of this, Albert was unknowingly selected to take part in an experiment. This experiment consisted of radiologists injecting Albert with a mix of plutonium isotopes, giving him many times the lethal limit for humans. The plutonium would stay in his system for 20 years after the experiment, until he died of a heart attack. Because of this, he's known as the world's most radioactive human. World War I was definitely one of the wars of all time, and it is full of weird stories, and this is definitely one of them. It goes as such: there was a German battalion, and they just used a bunch of chemical weapons on the Russian forces stationed at the fortress they were attacking. As they made their way into the fortress, they took note of the many bodies on the ground, covered in torn cloth and blood, when suddenly, the bodies started to rise, laying out a hellish screech. What happened is that the Germans are kind of shit, so the chemical weapons that they used were not potent enough to kill all of the soldiers at once, which led to a number of the soldiers surviving with various gruesome injuries. They would then take advantage of these injuries by playing dead and rushing the Germans with only axes, swords, and hatchets. This scared off the Germans and led to the Russians securing the area for just a little bit longer. Anatoli Burgorski is a retired Russian physicist who is most well known for his accident with a particle accelerator, where a particle went straight through his fucking head. Despite what common sense would have you believe, he did not in fact die from this. In fact, he just continued working on the machine he was repairing and went home. When he woke up, he realized something. His head was extremely fucking swollen. So he decided that would probably be good to tell his coworkers what actually happened. Because of this, he was experimented on tests to see what the side effects were, the most obvious of which was the large amount of swelling where the particle went into his head. He would then be flown to a clinic in Moscow where they hoped to observe his death. Despite all the odds though, he survived, and get this, he went back to work as a physicist at the same lab. Additionally, he is still alive today and is now retired. Atlantanites was a novel written by a group of authors under the pseudonym Travis T. It was written to be the worst book ever made, and it was used to test whether the book publisher Publisher America's claim of only accepting high-quality manuscripts was true. They were in fact not, because they would give this book a publishing deal. But shortly after that, the authors came out about the little ploy, their publishing deal was revoked. Oh no. for the reason that their manuscript did not meet their standards. And just to show how funny it is that this shit got past them, here's some of the more standout features of the book. There's not one, but 2 Chapter 12s, Chapter 17 is the same as Chapter 4, Chapter 21 is just straight up missing, and my favorite note, Chapter 34 was computer generated by Bonsai Story Generator. What the fuck? The Atacama Skeleton, also known as Atta, is the skeleton of a fetus found in Lenoria, a ghost town in the Atacama Desert, in 2003. A later analysis of the skeleton claimed that it had very strange mutations and deformities, but these reports are still disputed to this day, so I don't know. The skeleton was later sold to an unnamed Spanish businessman, and I'm not one to judge personally, but it's a little bit weird to buy the remains of other humans, right? Objectively, that is some supervillain shit. As you can probably assume by the name, the bat bomb was a bomb that would deploy bats. Go figure. Each one of these bats would have a small stash of napalm attached to them that would go off after the bats were released, starting fires in the targeted area. Although the bat bomb was seen as an effective weapon at the time, it took so long to develop that the atom bomb was finished before the testing was complete, so the bat bomb fell into obscurity. So my initial impressions, what the fuck did I just watch? That was probably the worst thing I've ever watched, and I have absolutely no words to describe what the fuck that was. In fact, I don't even think I have the mental fortitude to do so, but I will at least attempt it. So, here is my synopsis of what the fuck the first episode was, because I'm still in a state of shock and awe. So Homer, or Omar in this story, is living a normal life when suddenly a guy named Toadfish comes by and kicks Ned Flanders out of his house in addition to killing his 2 kids. He then goes over to Omar's house and takes Marge as his lover. So what the fuck? Then Omar goes to a safe house owned by Ned to escape Toadfish, where Bart, or Burton, throws a brick through the window, breaking Omar's jaw. Omar then goes back home where... well, I'll just let this play out.
Marge, you're breaking my heart.
So yeah, what the fuck? And this is just episode 1 of 4. When I was watching through these to make the script, one thing that caught me off guard was the sheer length of the thing. Episode 3 was 27 minutes long. Why? Let me just glaze over some of the weird shit in the later episodes. There's no real easy way to put this, so I'll just say it. They make even R. Kelly and Marge Simpson sex tape. Yup. Burton then goes on to sell that sex tape in a strip club. House from House MD is a character. The introduction of Stonefish, a more powerful version of Toadfish, I think. I still don't know what the fuck that one's about. Lisa's killed off at some point in the first episode off screen. Not gonna say this one out loud. Burton sucks Omar's dick to impress an unnamed woman on the computer. What the fuck? And wherever the fuck this is. Now, this might be the worst thing ever made in my opinion. It has a cult following online, and according to the comments section, it inspired some of the more strange animation artists from around the time, such as Pilot Red Sun. And apparently, this video was found saved on Osama bin Laden's hard drive. Okay. Man, we cannot get away from the war stories this tier, huh? The Battle of Castle Itter was the last battle fought in World War II, and might very well be the strangest one in the entire war. The battle was fought on May 5th, only 2 days before the Germans officially surrendered. The really strange thing about this battle is that there were only 36 people defending the castle from the attacking 200 Germans. Of these 36, some notable faces were multiple French prime ministers, a few German soldiers who defected and helped, and a few French prisoners of war, including the tennis superstar Jean Bourtra, who went John Wick mode and ran out of the castle past all the stationed German soldiers mid-battle to deliver an SOS message to nearby American reinforcements. Somehow he was able to accomplish this, and he was recognized by a reporter in the American camp. But rather than just stopping, as I'm sure many of us would, he requested, instead, a US military uniform to go back and fight with the Americans. Because of his help, the Germans were promptly defeated, and remarkably, only one of the defenders died during the whole battle. The Beale Papers are a collection of 3 ciphertexts that all describe different aspects of a stash of treasure that, in all likelihood, doesn't actually exist. Allegedly, a man named Thomas J. Beale gave the notes to a local innkeeper who kept them hidden for a number of years attempting to decipher them. he was only able to decipher one. Eventually, he gave his notes to his son before dying. His son would then publish the notes in a pamphlet to sell in the 1880s, and the rest is history. Since then, nobody's been able to decipher the other two letters, and nobody's claimed to have found the treasure, which contains 35,052 troy ounces of gold, 61,200 troy ounces of silver, and jewels worth about $220,000 US, which is hidden around the county of Bedford, around 4 miles from the town of Beaufort, in a vault 6 feet below the surface of the ground. In August 2019, 2 racks filled with sensors were placed at the bottom of the ocean, and everything went according to plan. Until a few days later, when both of them suddenly stopped relaying data back to scientists. When they looked into the 2 racks, they discovered that they were both just gone. All that could be found was a torn cable that was connected to them. To this day, no one really knows what happened to the 2 racks, and only one of them was recovered. It was found upside down 200 meters away. The other one is still missing this day, leading to some conspiracy theories revolving around the disappearances. These conspiracy theories mainly rely on 3 main suspects: pirates, aliens, and the Megalodon. Now the pirates, I guess that makes sense, but the aliens, yeah, sure, it, they're aliens, they can do whatever the they want. And the Megalodon, well, that one's really interesting. The Megalodon supporters think that the fucking shark just took the goddamn things, and then just off with them. I don't know. Big fin squid are an extremely rare squid species found in the deepest parts of the ocean. And just a quick side note, why the do we name the ocean such nightmarish names? Like, come on, Abyssal Plains, Abyssal Zone, the Hadal Zone, f***ing bristleworms? This all sounds like a f***ing horror game. All that aside, we know very little about the big fin squid, and we have very limited footage of it. In fact, it was considered to be a cryptid until the first footage of the squid was recorded on an offshore oil rig. The brown note is a theoretical pitch that, as legends say, make you shit yourself. That's really all there is to this one. It's just an urban legend that pops up from time to time. Interesting side note though, the brown note was tested on an episode of Mythbusters and was deemed as busted. The Boston Molasses flood happened on January 15th, 1919, and as you can probably guess, it involves Boston and a shit ton of molasses. The story goes that one day a storage tank with about 12,000 tons of molasses bursts, leading it to pour out all across the streets of Boston at a speed of 35 miles an hour. The flood ended up killing 21 people and injuring a further 150, leading to it becoming an infamous part of Boston folklore. And the locals even say that if you try very carefully on a hot summer day, you can still smell the molasses to this day. The Cecil Hotel was opened on December 20th, 1924 in Los Angeles, and since its opening, it has had a history of violence, murders, and unusual deaths attached to it. Because of that, it has gained a reputation for being haunted or cursed. The Cadaver Synod is the official name of the trial of Pope Formosus. He was brought to trial by his successor, Pope Stephen III, who did not very much enjoy his presence. What's so weird about this, you may be typing in the comments? Well, the only problem, Formosus at the time had been dead for 7 months. Yeah, Stephen was so petty that he had Formosus's body exhumed just to be put on trial. Without a lawyer, I might add. As you might have guessed, the dead guy can't really defend himself that well, so he was found to be guilty of his crimes and his reign as Pope was deemed null. Additionally, Stephen also decided that this wasn't enough, and he decided to have Formosus's body thrown into the local river. But apparently, Formosus was so pissed that this goofy shit was happening to his body that he came back, and allegedly, people witnessed his body performing miracles by the river where his body washed up. This caused the people of Rome to revolt against Stephen, and he was thrown in jail where he would be strangled. And you think this is where the story should end, right? But the story still isn't over. A little later, the next pope, Theodore II, held a retrial and decided that Formosus was in fact innocent and rehabilitated him, ordering that his body be reburied in the cemetery. And this brings an end to the story, is what I would say if there is still not more to the story, because later on, Pope Sergius III, who was also a co-judge in the original trial, decided to use his power to overturn the retrial and reinstate the original sentence given to him, finally bringing an end to our story. Just let the man die. Jump scare! Okay, if you're still here, you clearly like the video. Subscribe. Bye-bye. Capgras Delusion is a psychiatric disorder where somebody believes that their family member or pet has been replaced by an imposter. It is usually seen in people diagnosed with schizophrenia, and weirdly enough, it happens more in women than men. Ooh boy, time for a big one of the video. The Circleville Letters were a series of letters written to some of the residents of Circleville, Ohio. We're back in Ohio for another time. In which the writer wrote about the people's personal lives and threatened them. The main victim of these letters was a bus driver named Mary. In her letters, the writer claimed that he knew of her affair with the superintendent of the school district. These letters would happen for a few weeks until one of the letters came to her husband, Ron, in which the writer claimed to be watching his truck, this will come back later, and threatened that if his wife did not stop her affair, his life would be in danger. During all of this, the couple decided not to tell anybody about the letters because they just thought the writer would stop, and after trying to threaten them to release this to the TV or the radio, the writer did stop. But Mary said that she had an idea of who was saying the letters, and they decided to have Mary's sister's husband write a letter to the suspect claiming that they knew who he was. And this seemed to work. The letters suddenly stopped. The couple thought that that was the end of it, and it was, until a few weeks later when one night the couple suddenly got a phone call. When Ron picked up the phone, whatever was said to him must have enraged him. He grabbed his gun and rushed out the door to his truck. Only a few minutes later, Paul was dead. His car had collided with the tree, and when police came, they noticed something strange. Ron had fired his gun once before his death. His death was initially ruled to be foul play, but for some reason, Sheriff Radcliffe decided that was actually the result of drunk driving, despite many of his close friends not believing him to be a heavy drinker. And strangely enough, after Sheriff Radcliffe reported this, a few other citizens started receiving letters saying that the sheriff was involved in a cover-up. But even more strange is the eventual reveal that Mary and the superintendent were in a relationship together. Although they claim that this was only after the letters started coming, which, why the fuck would you start an affair after somebody threatens to expose it? I don't know. But this public acknowledgement of the relationship only led to further harassment from the writer, now choosing to get a little bit closer to Mary than he was before. The writer decided to put threatening signs on Mary's bus route. This continued for a few weeks until Mary eventually snapped, rushing over to one of the signs and tearing it down. When she did, the only thing she saw was a gun pointing directly at her head. The sign was booby-trapped, but by a stroke of pure luck, the trap did not go off. Inside the trap was a pistol. It was supposed to fire and kill Mary when she took down the sign. When the police came to collect the gun, they took note that the gun's security number was very poorly rubbed off, so they were still able to find the gun's original owner. And who was this gun's original owner? Well, it was a face that we've talked about before. It was Paul, the now ex-husband of Mary's sister. The police obviously assumed that Paul was behind this and decided to arrest him, despite Paul's claim that the gun had been recently stolen from him. When he was in custody, Sheriff Radcliffe decided to test Paul and have him rewrite the letters sent to Mary to see if the handwriting matched. And although Paul was never charged with writing the letters, it did not matter, because when Paul was eventually put on trial, they were still used against him as evidence in court. And it seemed as if the case was a slam dunk. A handwriting expert claimed that Paul wrote the letters, and even Mary came to testify against him, saying that his now ex-wife came to her and confided that she thought that Paul might have been the writer. And to put the final nail in the coffin, Paul's boss exposed that Paul was not at work the day that the booby trap was found. With all this evidence, how could the court not charge Paul? They found him guilty of the attempted murder of Mary, and he was sentenced to 7 to 24 years in solitary confinement. So that's it, right? Paul did it. Well, the story doesn't end just yet. Only a few months into his sentence, Paul received a letter. It was a letter from the writer saying that he wanted to keep Paul in there for as long as possible. And even more strange is that everybody else continued to receive letters too. Even though Paul was locked up in solitary confinement, the letters kept on coming. Eventually, Paul became eligible for parole, but because of the letters, he was kept in jail despite the fact that he could not possibly be writing them. Paul would finally get out on parole in 1994, the entire time proclaiming his innocence. Despite this entire saga, the writer's identity still remains a mystery. The story would become infamous for being unsolvable, and only a little bit after Paul was granted parole, the TV show Unsolved Mysteries wanted to run a segment on the writer, and during their filming, they received a letter. This letter read, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. if you come to Ohio, you L sickos will pay. The Circleville writer. Ooh, that was a long one. Okay, this is the name of a man-made hole in a lake in Portugal that looks like this, and it leads to a long underground tunnel. It is considered a marvel of engineering, and as a matter of fact, the entire lake was man-made. It was sort of a local secret until images of it went viral in 2016. Alright, this one's pretty gross, but here we go. Dave Matthews was on tour in 2004, and on August 8th, his tour bus was in Chicago and was going over a bridge. But unfortunately for the sightseeing boat below, there was a mistake on the tour bus, and the entire contents of the bus's waste bin was emptied onto the boat below. There were about 120 passengers on the boat, and about 2/3 of them were completely soaked in the human waste. Among these 2/3 were people with disabilities, the elderly, a pregnant woman, a small child, and an infant. So yeah, not very good. For their credit, the boat immediately docked and the passengers were rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, none of them had any serious effects from the incident. But because of the incident, the Dave Matthews Band had to pay over $200,000 in a settlement to the victims. But what I find a little bit morbidly funny is what happened to the boat immediately after this happened. So the incident happened at 1:18 p.m., and after the boat docked, it was cleaned and put back on the water by 3. I mean, holy shit, can you imagine being the workers on that shift? I would quit on the spot, personally. There is no way the pay that you are making is worth cleaning up all that shit. Crybaby Bridges refer to the numerous bridges around the world with local stories about hearing children screaming or crying around them. They commonly have local ghost stories attached to them, revolving around the bridge being haunted by some child's spirit who has died for some reason or another. Other than that, it is a little bit strange how common these bridges with these stories are if you look for them. And hey, let me know in the comments if you have any haunted bridges of your own near you. Oh boy, back with another war story. Digby Tatham-Warter was a British Army official who fought in the Second World War, and would wear a bowler's hat and bring an umbrella into every battle he was a part of. Let me set a little scene for you. You're in Dublin, Ireland, and late one night, a fire is raging through the city. And the worst possible scenario happens. The fire travels across the town and reaches a local malt house that unfortunately held 5,000 barrels of whiskey. And I'm sure as many of you know, fire and alcohol do not mix well. This resulted in most of the barrels bursting, causing a river of whiskey to flow down the streets of Dublin. And when the locals found out about this, they immediately rushed to the streets to help. And how'd they do this, you may ask? Well, they decided to start drinking all of the whiskey using any means necessary. People grabbed anything that could be used as a cup and started filling up. Some people even reportedly took off their boots and used them as cups. Unfortunately, 13 people died that night. But not burning to death or breathing too much smoke. No, all the deaths were attributed to alcohol poisoning. The Devils Kettle is a tourist attraction in Minnesota that has confused everybody until recently. If you just look at it without context, it looks like the water falls down from the cliff and then lands and disappears. But the water just keeps on coming. This has confused people for decades, and it was only until 2017 when hydrologists, which I didn't even know exist, came up with a theory that they thought made sense. They discovered that the water is actually funneled back to the top of the waterfall and is continually recycled by the waterfall and rain. Falun Gong is one of the largest philosophical beliefs in China. It has roots from Buddhism, and at the peak of its power, it was estimated to have over 70 million followers. But because of the current leader of Communist China at the time, this f***ing guy, he saw them as a threat to the party's authority. As a result, in 1999, he ordered a campaign to eradicate the group. Since 1999, the practitioners of Falun Gong had been subject to mass imprisonment, systematic torture, and just straight up torture. And since then, some serious allegations have been thrown around at the Chinese government claiming that they've been killing these prisoners to harvest and sell their organs. Now, there would be no way to prove this, right? Well, in December of 2018, a tribunal was held that concluded, and I quote, unanimously and sure beyond a reasonable doubt that in China, forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience have been practiced for a substantial period of time, involving a very substantial number of victims. Well, I think that's pretty cut and dry. So yeah, fuck you, Chinese government. Forest swats are a grouping of trees that have been sighted all over the place, the most famous one of which being in northeastern Germany. They were planted in 1938 to celebrate that one evil German guy's birthday. As you can probably tell by the blurred image, it is not a very nice symbol, and as a result there was an attempt to remove the trees in 1995. But this didn't do much because the symbol was very much still visible. This was put to a stop in 2000 when 25 more of the trees were removed, obscuring the symbol. But oddly enough, this isn't the only example of this image popping up in trees. In the late 1970s, another one of these symbols was found in the German capital, and again in Kyrgyzstan of all places, another one was discovered. But it's still unknown how this one showed up so deep in Soviet territory, which led to many local myths and legends about it popping up. On March 26, 1991, 5 boys ranging from age 9 to 13 decided to go and look for salamander eggs in the local river. They had the day off from school because it was a national holiday, but after they left, these boys would never be seen again, seemingly disappearing. Their disappearance caused a massive media frenzy and gained widespread coverage throughout South Korea. So much so that the president of South Korea at the time organized a massive manhunt for the boys, with as many as 300,000 police and military troops looking for the boys. But even though the mountain they went missing on was searched over 500 times, there was no trace of the boys. This was until 2002, when a group of hikers on that same mountain stumbled across the bodies of the boys. But what makes this even more strange is that the area they were found in had already been searched multiple times. When the hikers called in the bodies, the police initially believed that the boys got lost and died of hypothermia. But there were some very strange details on the bodies that the parents of the boys would use to dispute this. The most strange of this being the detail that one of the boys' clothes had been tied in knots, and there were even some unused bullets in one of the boys' clothes. Along with this, the boys' bodies were only a little bit away from a village that the boys were very familiar with. When the police looked more into the bodies, they discovered that 3 of them had blunt force trauma damage to the head that could have been caused by the metal farming tools used by the local villagers. The boys' disappearances and eventual recovery still remains a mystery to this day, and many people have drawn similarities to the Dyatlov Pass incident from earlier in the iceberg, with many theories revolving around the case. But despite that, the case remains unsolved today, and there is still no concrete answer on what happened to the boys that day on March 26, 1991. Fulcanelli was the name of a French alchemist and author in the mid-1920s whose real identity is still unknown. Reports say that he was prominent in 1937, and there was allegedly a presentation where he was able to transmute 255 grams of lead into gold. This presentation took place in a laboratory in the presence of multiple scientists and chemists. Strangely though, after all this, Fulcanelli completely disappeared and was not seen again since then, and any attempts to find him have failed, including one attempt by the United States Army after World War II. This one comes from a Reddit post where the OP brings up the idea that a large amount of glitter is being purchased by an unknown individual or company. The Reddit post talks about a news article about glitter and an interview with one of the top people at the glitter company, GlitterX. The Reddit post reads, "When I asked Ms. Dyer if she could tell me which industry served as GlitterX's biggest market, her answer was an instant, no, I absolutely know that I can't. But you know what it is." She then said, "Oh god, yes," she said and laughed, "and you would never guess it. Let's just leave it at that." I asked if she could tell me why, and she couldn't tell me. And she said, and I quote, "Because they don't want anybody to know that's glitter." This interview had a lot of people wondering who is this secret mystery buyer, and a few main suspects have been proposed for who it is and what they use the glitter for. One of these industries is toothpaste. You know those little bits and crest toothpaste? People think that that is glitter. The military is another common guess. Some people think that the military is covering aircrafts in glitter to help with aircrafts avoiding missiles, and the US Mint is my personal favorite guess. Go take out $1 and just look at it. It is actually very shiny, and it would make sense that they use glitter because that would actually make for a very good anti-counter theft measure. And finally, the makeup industry is a very likely guess, because they can make your skin glittery by putting microplastics in it. They probably would if it looked good, because the makeup industry is f***ed. So who do you think the secret glitter purchaser is? I still think that the US Mint is a very likely purchaser. Gil Perez was the name of a soldier who was the focus of a folk legend. The legend states that on October 24th, 1593, allegedly Gil Perez was guarding a palace in the Philippines when suddenly he felt dizzy and decided to close his eyes and lay against the wall. When he opened his eyes again, he was suddenly in Mexico City on the other side of the world. When the local guards questioned him, he couldn't give a good answer on how he got there and was thrown in prison, only being released a few months later when another person from the Philippines recognized him. It is still unclear if the story is true or not, but many people do believe in it, and have suggested two main explanations for how we got there. One, teleportation, or two, of course, aliens. Either way, it is a strange story, and has become a famous part of both Mexico City and Philippines folklore. And think about it, bro deadass found a warp spot from Mario 64. Ghost Watch was a BBC Halloween special that aired in 1992. It was marketed as fake, as per the law, but during the airing, the show presented itself as completely real, and as a result, a lot of the viewers at home that missed the earlier advertisements thought it was real as well. This resulted in the most common thing to happen on the iceberg so far, hysteria taking place among the viewers, including reports of paranormal events taking place during the airing, and some children were even diagnosed with PTSD as a result of the show. And even one report of a woman demanding compensation because her husband soiled his pants while watching the show. Because of these reports, the show has never been aired again, but you can find it on the Internet Archive if you look for it. Despite the harsh initial reception, the film would go on to inspire an entire generation of kids to get into and make horror content themselves. Alright, another video on the books. There we go. And sorry this one took so long to get out. I was swamped with finals and all the school stuff. I'll tell you this as a promise though, no more 2-month-long breaks for your boy. I'm gonna be out here grinding, and I'm going to get these videos out faster to you. So hey, stay tuned. Alright, that's the end of the video. I'll see you next time. Hopefully not in 2 months. You never know though. Okay, bye.